When the lights are the brightest and the stakes are the highest, Ohio State's defense rises to the occasion.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Victory Monday around here at Locked On Buckeyes, which is your daily Ohio State podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. During today's show, we'll dive into Ohio State's focus heading into the national championship, as well as the importance of having Quinshon, Judkins, and TreVeyon Henderson against Texas. But before we get to any of that, when the lights are the brightest and the stakes are the highest, Ohio State's defense rises to the occasion. They did it against Texas, they did it against Oregon, and they did it against Tennessee. This defense is playing in a way that it's going to be very hard for Notre Dame to go into the national championship in Atlanta and to try to find a crack or try to find an opening that they can exploit. Because this defense right now, from the four guys up front of the defensive line to the linebackers to the guys in the secondary, even if somebody goes down, they're able to overcome so much adversity and so many obstacles in the game. And it even happened all throughout the game against Texas. Outside of a couple drives, and even like almost three total, Texas really couldn't get anything going. Texas couldn't get anything flowing. The defense was right in Quinn Ewers' face. The defense was shutting down certain things Quinn Ewers wanted to do. There was absolutely no running game at all that Texas could try to get into. And that's because Ohio State's defense rose to the occasion in the Cotton Bowl. When you look at the playoff overall and you look at the Rose Bowl and the home game against Tennessee, what is one thing that we all remember? That Ohio State's defense made sure that the opposition couldn't get into a rhythm at all. Nico Iamaleava couldn't get flowing at all. He tried to do some things with his legs to open up some things through the air. Couldn't do it. Quinn Ewers, just a few days ago, numbers will tell you one thing, but he couldn't get anything going, man. He couldn't get into a rhythm. He was not able to do the things that he wanted to do to exploit some hole in Ohio State's defense. Dillon Gabriel, nothing, man. Oregon got down 34-0. And if you were to talk to me before that game and say, Jay, do you think Ohio State could be up 21-0 against Oregon? I probably would have said no. If you said, they have a 30-point lead against Oregon, maybe not a 30-0 lead, but a 30-point lead at some point against Oregon, I would have said, no, you're crazy. And if you believe that, I need some of what you're on because you're crazy too. That's what happened. 21-0 was the lead before Tennessee scored for the first time. Ohio State scored 34 unanswered points. Those are the first 34 points in the Rose Bowl. This is because of the defense. Now, you may want to say, Jay, the offense scored a lot of those points. Okay. But when you get that goose egg out there on the scoreboard for any team and one team's up by 21 or another team's up by 34, it's not just the offense doing a lot of things successfully. It's in large part because the defense is shutting down the opposition. And one thing I did before coming on here on a Monday was go back and look at some numbers from the past three games. Because one thing we said about Ohio State's defense, they didn't get pressure on the opposition as often as they needed to. Now, the second half of the regular season, Jim Knowles started to change things up, and you saw more pressure on the quarterback week after week after week. But right now, if you even take away the QB hits, if you look at sacks, tackles for loss, and pass breakups, the numbers from these three games, these three playoff games that Ohio State has played, they're insane. Kind of stupid, honestly. I mean, stupid in a good way because nobody would have expected Ohio State to do this against Tennessee, against Oregon, and against Texas. Against Tennessee, Ohio State had 4 sacks, 7 TFLs, 9 pass breakups. Against Oregon, Ohio State had 8 sacks, 13 TFLs, and 9 pass breakups. It's really good, guys. And then against Texas, 4 sacks, 9 TFLs, 7 pass breakups. And Denzel Burke didn't play in the second half against Texas. He had an upper upper extremity injury that kept him out of the second half. And they were still able to do this. And Texas was still unable to get anything going to their receivers as far as getting them into the end zone and really any success outside at all. These guys were doing a lot of things right. The totals, that's 16 sacks in the postseason, 29 TFLs in the postseason, and 25 PBUs in the postseason. This is the stuff that you get from a championship-level defense. And in the middle of the season, myself and Jeff Hunt came on this show and answered the question, both of us were answering the question of if Ohio State has a championship-level defense. And honestly, we both said yes. Now, after the Oregon game, this was after the halfway point. Normally, Jeff and I would do midseason grades and grade every position group. But I said, no, let's just change it up and change how we analyze the offense and defense this year. So we just ask championship-level defense. We ask about the offense, too. The defense answer was both a unanimous yes. And we're seeing that right now. But even what we're seeing right now from Ohio State's defense, they're playing in a way that is not what most people expected. I know I didn't expect this. I expected a lot of great play. I expected them to maybe have a goal line stand or two. Texas, we definitely saw that in that game. I didn't expect them to have at least 4 sacks in every playoff game. I didn't expect them to have 7 or more TFLs in every playoff game. I didn't expect them to have 7 or more PBUs in every single playoff game. This defense is not just prepared. They are ready to pass any test. And we have seen that from Ohio State's defense against Tennessee, who posed one threat, against Oregon, who posed a different threat, against Texas, which had a different threat that they could pose to Ohio State's defense. It doesn't matter who's out there. They're coming out there to shut you down, to not allow you to get into that end zone, to make you make some heroic plays and to put together some miraculous drives to go out there to get into the end zone. Because Ohio State's defense is playing so well at every single level. The coaches are coaching so well across the board that these guys are prepared. They have gone through a grind. They have been re-engineered. They have had some added motivation along the way, and they are right now playing in a way that Notre Dame is an offense that can do some things successfully to some teams. I don't know if what Notre Dame's offense is known for will have any success against Ohio State's defense. Now, I mentioned that goal line stand that Ohio State had at the end of the game against Texas. Everybody knows you can't do anything in the middle against Ohio State on the goal line, but Texas had a try. And if they're going to try, at least do it on first down. First and goal from the 1 yard line. Try to run? No, nothing. Second and goal. You got pushed back a little bit. All of a sudden, you try to toss, which is very, very stupid, by the way. Ohio State tried that on 3rd and 1, and everybody and their mom was out there on Twitter saying, why do you do that? I even made a comment. There's nothing wrong with running a QB sneak on 3rd and 1. Didn't do it, but it's true. You should just run a QB sneak. All of a sudden, Texas on 3rd and goal. They tried to throw a pass to the left side of the end zone. Incomplete. It was a few yards away from the receiver. Quinn Ewers just didn't get the ball accurately to the guy. Then all of a sudden on 4th down, when you need somebody to make a play, Captain Jack said, I got you, LJ. I'll make that play. He beat the right tackle bad off the snap, got right around him. The next thing you know, his former teammate in Quinn Ewers is now the guy that's on his backside because of a strip sack of Jack Sawyer. He scoops that thing up and ran 80-plus yards to the end zone. Because when you needed somebody to make a play and needed somebody to rise to the occasion, the Buckeyes defense did it, and Captain Jack was the guy that made the biggest play of the night. Jack Sawyer made some plays. Caleb Downsnipe threw on that second down toss. It did that thing. Lathan Ransom was back there too. This defense is elite. This defense is playing at a championship level, and Notre Dame better be ready for what's coming to them in Atlanta on January 20th, on Martin Luther King Day, might I add, when they have a date with the Buckeyes in the Natty. One thing we saw against Texas is something I expect from the Buckeyes backfield against Notre Dame in about a week from now. We'll discuss that next. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes into a TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you all for tapping into Locked On Buckeyes and making this show your first listen of the day. Throughout this week, we're going to have coverage of Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the CFP National Championship game a week from today. Also, once again, after the National Championship, we will have a Locked On Buckeyes squad show instantly reacting to Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the Natty. Now, speaking of the Natty, there's one thing I want to see Ohio State do in the Natty that they did against Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And it's about the two guys in the backfield, TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They have been an efficient duo all season long, and Ohio State needs those two guys to provide their best game and to bring their best in Atlanta a week from today. And I firmly believe they're going to, because TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are way healthier and way fresher than they normally are in January. Also, neither one of them have played this deep into the season, so that's another added reason for these two guys to be fresher based off the amount of carries they have had throughout the first 15 games they played. I had to think about that. I was listening to a show recently, and one guy was asking, what is Ohio State's record? Not because he doesn't cover the team at a high level, which he does, but you're just not used to them playing this many games. You know, they played 3 playoff games. Sometimes you may think they played 12 regular season. Could it be 13? It's weird, man. 13-2 is a record right now. Very well could be 14-2, because I think a lot of people realize that Ohio State is not more talented. The gauntlet and the grind they've gone on this season has prepared them to have success against Notre Dame. But TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, just by the numbers this past week, their numbers weren't the sexiest in the backfield. TreVeyon Henderson, 6 carries for 42 yards, 72 yards a pop. And then Quinshon Judkins this past weekend, 9 carries for 36 yards, 4 yards a pop. And so when you look at it, you're thinking, okay, Jay, one guy had 42 rushing yards. Another guy had 36 rushing yards. Wouldn't you like somebody to be over 100 rushing yards for a game? Not really. When you have a couple guys like that, if they both were between 70 and 75 yards, if they combine for 150 apiece or something like that, that's probably more where you want them to be, because of the way the offense goes at Ohio State, and the reasons and the times that Ohio State chooses to run are dictated and based on how successful the passing game is. Even though against Texas, Ohio State came out and ran 2 or 3 times in a row, which on the first drive, I think the split in the first drive, Ohio State had 2 less rushes than passes on that first drive, which was not on my bingo card. But Chip Kelly knew he needed to come out and do something a little bit different. He did something different between the Oregon game versus the Tennessee game. And you knew that if he came out and passed a little bit, that's what is expected. Everyone thought he may try to pass more, but no. Quinshon Judkins was made for that kind of game, because Texas's defensive line may have been the best D-line Ohio State has played in the playoff. I know I can't say regular season because Michigan's D-line is real. I'm not going to lie about it. Can't sugarcoat it. That's a real D-line, but Texas is his too. Texas had some future pros on that defensive line as well. And he kind of realized maybe if we try to run a little bit, it'll help us on the outside. Ultimately, Howard, okay game, not his best game in the world, but I do think some of the runs helped him a little bit as far as getting some open holes and trying to make some very accurate passes. This year, by the numbers, TreVeyon Henderson only has 132 carries, 967 rushing yards, 7.3 yards a pop, and 10 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins, 183 carries, 960 rushing yards, 5.2 yards a pop. If you have your number 1 back and your number 2 back, because either guy could start, they are right there around the 190, 190 carry mark. Judkins has 183. Henderson has 132. So neither one is at 190. But there's about 50 more rushes between the two guys. But they're both right around the 1,000-yard mark for the season. 960 for Judkins, 967 for Henderson. You could very well have a season where Ohio State has two running backs that have 1,000 rushing yards in a season, and both of them have over 10 rushing touchdowns for the season. That's insane. When you think about the difference between Henderson from last year and this year, we think about Judkins, the difference from last year and this year. Neither guy is used to getting this many carries, this few amount of carries. Most of them are used to getting the ball more, being a bigger factor in the passing game. Both of them are in different roles, but they have been efficient this year. And their efficiency is needed in the playoff, in the national championship against Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame's going to try to do similar things that Texas did to take away Jeremiah Smith. But then you have a Cardinal Tate, you have an Emeka Buka, but also you have a TreVeyon Henderson, and you know he is a one-cut-and-go kind of guy. And when he gets that one-cut-and-go, homie gets out. He did that on a screen pass with 29 seconds left on the game clock at the end of the first half. Chip Kelly dials up a screen, and it was not expected at all. I kind of thought Ohio State was going to slow roll that thing, maybe run one or two plays, go into the locker room because you get the ball back at halftime and the start of the second half. No. They said, no, we can do certain things because we are going to catch them off guard, and we got number 32, and they ain't got number 32. Next thing you know, Will Howard drops back, gets that thing to TreVeyon Henderson in space, who also has some big D offensive linemen in front of him. Three of them. I know Luke Montgomery was one. I forget who the other two were, but they were right there saying, hey, man, get behind us. We're going to be a moving wall for you. And with that moving wall and Henderson's speed and his ability to elude tacklers in the open field, homie was gone. 75 yards, touchdown, and Ohio State could have gone to the locker room tied. They said, no, we want to be up 14-7. And it's because of a couple things. Ryan Day wanted to be a little bit more aggressive. Chip Kelly understood the assignment, but you also have a fresh backfield. Think about how important it's going to be for Notre Dame to potentially use their second or third running back with Jeremiah Love's injury. You would love to have a guy in the backfield that's right around the same level of play and as consistent, as good of a player as your number one back. There's only one Jeremiah Love. There's only one TreVeyon Henderson. But Jeremiah Love's backup is not at the level of Quinshon Judkins. And Judkins has been starting recently. So if your change of pace guy is TreVeyon Henderson, that's a big old change of pace. When you're not bringing the bruiser and the guy that's more better between the tackles off the bench, but you're bringing your guy that probably is going to run a low 4.4, high 4.3 at the combine, who's going to test very well. He's a crazy, freaky athlete in TreVeyon Henderson, and he's coming off the bench. Man, think about what that means for a defense. The first drive of the game, okay, Judkins is out there the entire time, even scores on the opening drive. Cool. Next thing you know, Henderson's out here. Whoa. So I gotta change my mind. I gotta change how I think. I gotta change a lot of things going out here because of Henderson's appearance on the field. Yeah, that's your change of pace. That's a 4-year Buckeye. That's a guy that has a chip on his shoulder. That's a guy that wants to prove that he has the goods and he is raising his draft stock. That's the guy that Notre Dame's going to have to worry about. Texas had to deal with them, Oregon and Tennessee. Notre Dame, bring your A game because Ohio State's backfield has been efficient this year, and those two guys are ready to go off in the natty to bring a national championship back to Columbus, Ohio. One thing Ohio State needs to focus on heading into the national championship so they secure the national championship trophy when they're in Atlanta a week from today is very, very important, and Ryan Day spoke on it at his presser on Sunday. We'll dive into it next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of past playoff games and can't wait to make new memories with the updated format and extra teams involved. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an upcoming game. Browsing through the deals was a breeze, and I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The super deal stood out as the best value for the event. I love that I could use the seat views before buying, and that the app shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank y'all for tapping into Locked On Buckeyes and making this show your first listen of the day. Ohio State against Texas did a lot of good things. There were a few things that stood out, and there are things Ohio State needs to focus on heading into the national championship. I call them drive killers. Ohio State had a lot of penalties. They had a lot of boneheaded decisions, some bad play calls, and they had some things that kind of got in their way or were self-inflicted wounds. And those self-inflicted wounds stopped lots of drives. And Ohio State can't have that against Notre Dame. Notre Dame just overcame a lot of adversity against Penn State in the Orange Bowl, where they even down had to come back and climb and overcome a lot of things that were things that they allowed to happen in the game. And that mindset is one that if Ohio State once again has boneheaded penalties or false starts or holding calls or this or that, what are you going to find? That's going to allow Notre Dame to not only build confidence, allow them to build momentum, and allow them to stay in the game longer than Ohio State players want them to be. You can't allow these self-inflicted wounds to continue against Notre Dame. One thing that happened during our Locked On Buckeye squad show after the Cotton Bowl was Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football came on here and talked about how bizarre it was for Ohio State to have the penalties that they have. They're normally a well-disciplined team. They don't make those mistakes very often. Then all of a sudden, in what could have been their final game of the year, you have a TreVeyon Henderson punching a guy in the face. I'm going to touch on that later on. Emeka Buka got called for a holding call. Josh Fryer got called for a false start. I think it was on TreVeyon, but they called it on Josh Fryer. Josh Fryer got called for holding on that same drive. There was a sack on third down, which led to a punt the very next play. There was that toss on third and short, which still in my head, that's not a penalty. That's a bad play call. It's just a self-inflicted wound. And then there was the unsportsmanlike conduct. These are just a few of them on Austin TreVeyon, where he hit a guy after the whistle. And in the moment, if I'm a player, if I hear the whistle, it's kind of hard to stop my momentum, especially if I'm an offensive lineman. But the whistle was blown. He kept going. He hit a couple guys. They went down. It was right by a ref. You know homie's going to call the flag, throw the flag. It's just what's going to happen. But these self-inflicted wounds are so uncharacteristic for Ohio State in any game. But when you do things in a big stage, when there's a lot of pressure on you, and you make these boneheaded mistakes, that could lead to massive disaster and a loss. Now, if you overcome some of these self-inflicted wounds during a game like Ohio State did against Texas, great. But it would be even better if you wouldn't have to worry about overcoming self-inflicted wounds in this variety because, well, you're not making them. You're not making mistakes. You're not punching a guy as soon as you get off the ground. I don't know what was said to TreVeyon Henderson. I don't know if it was a push. I don't know if it was something in his ear. I have no idea. All I know is this is not a football rule. This is a sport rule across the board. You can't punch somebody on the field or on the court or on the ice without getting punished. You can't. Basketball, technical. Sometimes a fighting, you get thrown out the game right away. Football, if you punch a guy, it's an immediate flag. Baseball, hey, if you leave your bench, they're probably going to review the film, see you throw a punch, you're going to get punished. Hockey, yeah, they allow fighting, but at the end of y'all fight, if y'all throwing hands, both y'all going in the penalty box. punching a player has never been allowed in sports. So for someone, I saw this somewhere and I was trying to keep my cool because it didn't make any sense. You can't give permission for him to do it because of what was said. That's not right. Never has been, never will be. I don't know what was said. Now, I do know TreVeyon Henderson after that did some things on the sideline personally, reflecting on what happened and looking inward in regards to what happened. Great. The ability for you to do that during a game and to come back and make a play after that in the same half where it happened, hey, hats off to you, man. Hey, I'm clapping up for you because trust me, I have been in those situations. Now, I've never gotten up and punched somebody after a play, but I've been there, man, where I've been heated in the moment, especially on the football field. I can remember a game. I believe it was my junior year. Junior year. We didn't play Warren. My senior year, I remember what happened. I remember me and a guy was going at it, and all of a sudden, man, I was doing stuff out of pocket, out of character. I mean, I didn't get penalized for it. Homie popped me later on in that game, and I went back to the sidelines, and some of my buddies had to look at me and say, "Man, did that really happen?" Yeah, bro, it did. It definitely happened. But you just can't do it. Just like TreVeyon Henderson can't get up and punch somebody, Ohio State can't continue to do this. Yes, I understand the pressure is on. Yes, I understand they were feeling certain things that they hadn't felt all season. There's more pressure in a Cotton Bowl, in a national semifinal, in a 12-team playoff that no player there has ever felt before. Some of them have been in the national semifinal against Georgia in 2022. Some of them were on the national championship team or the team that went to the Natty in the 2020 season. Cool. All that's great. This is a different type of grind, man. You're playing football way later into the season. There's never been a game of Martin Luther King Day ever in college football as far as a national championship game. Ever. And so everything is different. Everything is new. And yes, there are going to be moments where you get heated, or there are going to be moments where someone says something about your mama, or there are going to be moments where Igbenogson gets someone spits in Igbenogsson's face. Those things might happen. Igbenogson against Oregon, he didn't fight back. That guy, was it Holden? I forget the receiver's name at Oregon. He got penalized. It happens, man. If somebody does something to you in the football game, no matter if it's something they said, they pushed you, no matter what it was, you can't retaliate in that way. Ohio State also can't keep doing what they did against Texas with the penalties, the boneheaded decisions. Sometimes there are missed blocks. Sometimes there are missed assignments. Sometimes Will Howard's clock is not fast enough. Trust me, my wife hears me all the time. I will always say, man, your clock is slow. And she knows what I'm talking about because she's watched enough games with me to know the lingo that I utilize in a game. My brother knows it. My dad knows it. We'll sit up here saying, man, your clock is too slow. What are you doing? Get rid of the ball. That was one of my knocks with Justin Fields for a couple of years. Kyle McCord a year ago, one of my knocks on him. Your clock is too slow. Speed up. Sometimes self-inflicted wounds aren't penalties. Sometimes they're things you're doing where you think, oh, I'm trying to do something good. But what I'm trying to do that's good, ultimately, it might not be the right path to make that thing actually happen. So, yes, going into the national championship, Ohio State needs to focus on self-inflicted wounds and just eliminate them. They overcame them against Texas. I have no reason to believe they wouldn't overcome them against Notre Dame. But if you don't have self-inflicted wounds to overcome, that's the way to go. Thank y'all for tapping into Locked On Buckeyes here on this Victory Monday. A week from today, Ohio State and Notre Dame will meet down in Atlanta, Georgia for the national championship and the first ever 12-team playoff. This format has been fun. Yeah, I know that it's not the best way and the best format for college football. A 12-team playoff is fun, man. They had a lot of good games. Yeah, there's going to be blowouts. That's going to happen. But the 12-team format has brought us a lot of games, has had the stakes be very, very high, has brought about a lot of pressure. It feels more like the NFL playoff, which I think that's what college football wants. I mean, literally, I was watching a game earlier today in the NFL. Bills beat, who did the Bills beat? The Broncos? It was it was a wide margin of victory. But that's football. You're going to get that kind of stuff in the first round, maybe the second round. But the Final Four round, the Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl. Those were the kind of classics that college football fans like you and I want to watch every year in the playoff. You can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky or TikTok or Threads or any social media app at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. Thanks for tapping in, Buckeye fans, on this Victory Monday. We'll see you next time.